For years, Alan Chambers was known for a message about change. He led one of the most visible religious organizations connected to the belief that a person's sexual orientation could be changed through faith, counseling, prayer, and discipline. Then years later, he publicly stepped away from that message. He apologized. He said the movement had caused pain. And for many people watching from the outside, it looked like a public reversal. A man who had once promoted a deeply controversial idea, now admitting that the promise of change had harmed people. But in May of 2026, authorities in Florida said a very different story had begun. This was not about a public speech. It was not about a ministry conference. It was not about an apology from the past. It was about private messages, an undercover investigation, and a man who, according to deputies, believed he was talking to a 14-year-old boy. Let me tell you the story of Alan Chambers, the former religious ministry leader now facing serious charges in a developing criminal case. The public image. Before the arrest, Alan Chambers was already a well-known and controversial public figure. In 2001, he became president of Exodus International, an organization connected to the movement that promoted orientation change through religion and counseling. For years, Exodus presented itself as a place of transformation. Supporters saw it as a path toward healing, faith, and personal change. But many people who lived through that world later described something very different. They described shame, pressure, confusion, and the feeling that a central part of who they were had been treated as something broken. Chambers was not just a distant administrator. He became one of the faces of that movement. He was married, had children, and spoke publicly about his own experiences with same-sex attraction. Over time, he also began distancing himself from the strongest promises associated with the movement. He acknowledged that the idea of a complete cure was not realistic. But for many years, he still represented an organization built around the belief that orientation could be changed. Then, in 2013, everything shifted. Chambers publicly apologized for the harm caused by Exodus International and by the broader culture around it. He said the organization had contributed to pain, shame, and emotional damage. Soon after, Exodus International shut down. To some, that moment mattered. It felt like a rare public admission from someone who had helped lead a powerful movement. To others, the apology came too late. But after that, Chambers appeared to move into a quieter life. He worked in business in Winter Park, Florida. He became connected to local community leadership, and the national attention that had once surrounded him began to fade until 2026. The online conversation. According to authorities, the investigation began months before the arrest. Deputies say Chambers communicated on Snapchat with someone he believed was a 14-year-old boy. But the person on the other side of the screen was not a child. It was an undercover detective. The distinction matters, but it does not make the case disappear. In cases involving online solicitation, authorities often focus on what the suspect believed, what was said, and whether there was an alleged attempt to move the conversation toward a real-world meeting. According to investigators, the messages did not stop after one exchange. They say the conversation continued over time and later moved from Snapchat to Telegram. Law enforcement documents reportedly describe the messages as inappropriate and sexual in nature. Because this is an active legal case, those details should be handled carefully. They are allegations. They have not yet been proven in court, and Alan Chambers is presumed innocent unless proven guilty. Still, investigators say The communications were serious enough to continue documenting the case. They were looking at the timeline. They were looking at the platforms used. They were looking at whether Chambers understood the age of the person he believed he was speaking to. And according to authorities, the messages suggested that he did. Deputies also allege that Chambers discussed the possibility of meeting in person, including a potential meeting connected to Park Avenue in Winter Park. At the same time, investigators say some messages appeared to show concern about the age difference and about getting in trouble. For law enforcement, that detail may become important, because the case is not only about what was typed on a screen. It is about whether the messages show knowledge, intent, and a possible step towards something offline. The investigation. Undercover investigations like this are usually built slowly. A profile is created, messages are documented, dates, usernames, platforms, and account details are preserved. Investigators try to establish not only what was said, but when it was said, how often it happened, and whether the suspect took any action that moved the situation forward. According to the available case details, the alleged communication began around February of 2026 and continued into May. For months, the person Chambers believed he was messaging was actually an undercover detective. That means no real 14-year-old was physically waiting for him. But under the law, authorities can still bring charges when they believe someone attempted to solicit a minor, even if the minor was actually an officer posing online. In May, the investigation reached its turning point. Chambers was arrested during a traffic stop in Orange County, Florida. Authorities reported 3 charges: solicitation of a minor using a computer, transmission of material harmful to minors, and unlawful use of a two-way communication device. All 3 were reported as third-degree felonies. After the arrest, Chambers posted bond and was released with court restrictions. Those restrictions reportedly included no contact with minors under 18 and limits on internet and social media use. His local community role was also suspended pending review. The story quickly moved beyond Florida, not only because of the charges, but because of who Chambers had been. This was not an unknown name. This was a man whose public life had already been built around some of the most personal and painful questions of identity, religion, shame, change, and apology. The unanswered question. The reason this case drew attention was not only the arrest, it was the contrast. Alan Chambers had once led a movement that told people their orientation could be changed. Then he became known for publicly apologizing for the damage caused by that message. Now, years later, he is accused of communicating inappropriately with someone he allegedly believed was a 14-year-old boy. For people who already viewed his former organization as harmful, the case reopened old wounds. For people who had accepted his apology as sincere, the allegations were shocking and difficult to process. But public reaction is not the same as a verdict. Right now, this is a developing criminal case. Chambers has been arrested and charged. He has not been convicted. The evidence will have to be tested in court, and any defense he presents will matter. What is known is that authorities say they conducted a months-long undercover investigation, documented online communications, and arrested him after concluding that the evidence supported criminal charges. What remains unknown is how the case will unfold. There may be evidence the public has not seen. There may be arguments from the defense that have not yet been heard. There may be more details that emerge as the court process continues. For now, the story sits in an uncomfortable place. It is a news story, an arrest, a set of serious allegations, and a public figure whose past makes the present case even more closely watched. Alan Chambers was once known for speaking about change. Then he was known for apologizing for the harm that message caused. Now, a court will decide what can be proven about the messages authorities say he sent in 2026. Until then, the question remains unresolved. Was this the next chapter in a complicated public life, or the moment a carefully rebuilt image began to fall apart?